Okay, ladies and gentlemen, come dive into the open minds where you can broaden your perspectives, expand your horizons, and open your eyes to a reality never thought possible. Just remember, once you open that door, there's no going back. I am your host, Robbie Diesel. This is the Open Mind Show. This is episode 14 with my guest, Mikaela. How you doing?
I'm doing wonderful. And just by that introduction alone, I could tell you're already an MC. You got you got your rapid vibes in. It's great. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
Hell yeah. Thank you for coming on the show. Tonight's episode, we're going to get into microdosing, something I've been wanting to talk about with somebody that's very familiar with the subject for a long time. So what exactly is microdosing?
So microdosing is the ingestion of any substance in a small or sub-perceptual level, and when taken over time, has a cumulative effect. So what microdosing, is now coming online for is mostly microdosing with psychedelics, right? But you can microdose all kinds of different substances. You can microdose marijuana, and some people don't realize that when we say microdosing, we're talking about a much larger practice, which is to tune the body with small amounts. It's almost like homeopathy, but for hallucinogens or mind-altering substances. So, imagine a macro dose of wine is drinking an entire bottle. Well, having a micro dose is like a thimbleful or a shot glass of wine. So we get some benefits from the physiological properties within whatever substance that we have without the, extremely mind-altering effects of it at higher doses. So a lot of people microdose and have been microdosing psilocybin lately, but you can also microdose LSD, where a lot of studies have been done with microdosing LSD, and I know we'll talk about that a little bit later, but you can also microdose ayahuasca. You can microdose peyote cactus and also San Pedro. So there's such a wide scope for what can be microdosed. But I'm sure you approached me because you've heard a lot about microdosing psilocybin. So, would love to get into that. But I really want people to know that microdosing psilocybin it's not, the world's your oyster with microdosing.
So like with microdosing, kind of like you said, it's the idea is not to get high, for anybody wondering.
Yes. What we kind of talk about on this scale of effects with certain hallucinogens is what we call like a threshold, right? You have a microdose, you have a threshold, and you have like a macro dose or like a heroic dose. And just for perspective, what these amount to in like grams, for example, a microdose would be anything within 0.1 to sometimes up to a gram, depending on what your threshold is. And threshold is when your perceptual state of consciousness starts to shift. So 1 gram to about, 3.54 grams is a very perceptual, some people would call a full dose experience. Anything 3.54 grams and above, some people call like a macro dose. And if you're a follower of Baba Kalindi's work, he was like a mega doser. So this is, 20 grams and above.
Wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, we can't really talk about microdosing unless we understand like really the scale and how far human consciousness can go with these substances. Terrence McKenna always talked about the heroic dose being at 5 grams. Well, Baba Kalindi is talking 50 grams. So, a microdose for someone who's a mega doser, 3 grams could be a microdose for them. So to the average person, anywhere between 0.1 and 1 gram is what we would consider below threshold. So you're not going to have those classic psychedelic effects, which is perception, time shift, visuals, body sensations, that feeling of hyperconnectedness with the whole universe that's deeply profound. With microdosing, those effects are a lot more subtle, but for a lot of people like parents, it could be a more reasonable way to interact with the substance because maybe we don't have it within our bandwidth to carve out 6 hours of time, but can still get the benefits of the molecule.
Wow. So what got you into this?
I've been eating mushrooms for many years.
Mhm.
So, my first psychedelic experience was when I was a freshman in college, and I was introduced to LSD by a friend of mine who was from the Bay Area. And so he had a very hyphy fucking trip sit for me, which was absolutely incredible. So we were hiking a mountain. We were getting ready at the bottom of the mountain, and he gave me my tab. And he was like, after I took it, he's like, "You don't have anyone in your family who's got like mental illness, do you?" And I was like, "Why the fuck would you ask me that right now? Like it's already too late." And he's like, "No, no, no, just don't worry about it. Don't worry," I said that. So, it's funny because all along the way, I've just seen how people sit for each other, and it's just something that's so human. Like we just offer medicine to each other all the time. If we're in a smoking circle, like, "Hey, hit this blunt," or whatever. And like that's offering medicine. Every time you share medicine with someone, you're sitting for them. So he actually took on the role of being my sitter. We hiked the mountain. And when it came on, it just open minds, boom, like the whole veil just kind of came down. I was dealing with the death of my father from many years prior, came to terms with so much of that. The people in my life and the things that happened to me transformed into things that happened for me. And that was such a good perspective change. I no longer became a victim because my perception was distorted in a way that really helped me overcome trauma. And I think that's really a wonderful tool, a mechanism of these hallucinogens, is that you can't change what happened, but you can change the way you feel about what happened. And that alone will rewire your brain chemistry. So I came into LSD that first time, and that was not a microdose. I had a full tab, which was great. And then shortly after, I actually think maybe within the same month, I came into psilocybin because one of my roommates had a link and was like, "Let's all trip together." So I'm like, "Okay, okay." Put on the Pink Floyd, did the whole, did the cheers of the mushroom. Like we had mushrooms saying cheers, and then we just went for it. And it was a rainy day outside, so we were forced inside and just committed to doing art and listening to music, and was in a group. And I finally, for like the first moment in my life, felt very comfortable and happy being in the skin I was in. And that was something I never really felt before in my whole life. So my goodness, that was almost 10 years ago. And here I
Wow.
am, an educator, an advocate, someone who's literally committed their entire life to serving mushrooms. And that doesn't just mean me giving mushrooms to you, but also serving their message and bringing their message down to planet Earth and embodying it and like sharing it with people. That's also a way that we serve mushrooms.
It's like a spiritual worker. That's what it sounds like. You're getting people to tap in with themselves, which is, I think, wonderful, because the world that we live in right now, we're so disconnected from that with technology, media, social media, just everything that we're spoon fed and put in our face. So I think that's very important, no matter what level you do that at, to people like you that are teachers. I've had quite a few, tarot card readers on here, Navajo tribesmen, and it's always the same thing. It's about tapping in with the soul and the spirit. Um, I was born in San Jose, so I'm familiar with the Bay Area pretty
Okay.
good.
Yeah.
Uh, I
Yeah,
think,
he had Hennessy, and we were listening to E40 for most of my experience. So
yeah.
good.
So when you say sitter, was he like, did he stay sober while you tripped,
He was a
or
tree sitter.
oh, he was.
He was also dosed.
Okay. So he was that's great.
Yeah.
So I feel like, to touch on that, I mean, even with people, so like you said, it varies from somebody's perspective on like what's a microdose, what's a macrodose, what's a full trip. Um, I think it's a thin line, especially for people like me. I'm a recovering alcoholic and addict. I've been clean and sober for 9 years. Uh,
Beautiful.
Never got the chance to do LSD, but I had done shrooms a couple times. Ecstasy was I had a couple hallucinogenic trips off ecstasy.
Yeah.
Um, but I just feel like, for anybody out there doing it, if you do have that or not, there is a thin line. And I think, you correct me if I'm wrong, it's almost kind of important. Like if you're going to dive into this stuff, especially if somebody who was like me, like you don't want to cross that line of going into like getting high. You know what I mean? Like I feel like there's a whole body of like work behind it besides just microdosing.
Mm.
Am I right?
When you say getting high, what you're kind of speaking to is like, what is a person's intention coming into it?
Mm-hmm.
And that does make a difference. That makes a profound difference in how you arrive is how you're received, and
Mm-hmm.
how the lessons will be given to you.
Okay.
So, yeah, I think intention really makes a big difference, and also can make microdosing as effective, if not more effective, than taking larger doses. And that's what's really interesting, is that you can actually have a more, you can be able to pull from an experience even more on the lower levels when you come with a lot of intention, thoughtfulness, and work behind it, as opposed to eating as many mushrooms as you can with like no planning and like no ritual and no ceremony within it. And I've actually seen some people have the heroic dose and completely black out. So they're like in a hole, essentially having a very challenging experience physiologically, come out and have no lessons to really integrate, or have a real challenge pulling forward any knowledge or discernible information. So, it's in the dose, but it's also in the intention. And when people just come to have mushrooms to trip out, get high, have visuals, you might be more likely to have what some people would call a bad trip or a really challenging experience.
Yeah, because I feel like when I did shrooms, it wasn't definitely not on a spiritual level, and I regret it because now being sober, I'm like, damn, bro, like if I approached it like that, it probably would have been like a completely different experience.
Right. Yeah.
So, like, what are some of the health benefits, like specifically?
Yeah. So we have a good sister in our community named Acacia Lewis, who is like the ultimate neuroscientist for psychonauts. So hopefully I can plug you in, and like she could talk to you about all the neuroscience, because it is just incredible how much psilocybin affects the brain and how it affects the brain. And what we are knowing to understand about just mushrooms in general, and what some mushrooms have as far as their capabilities, like lion's mane, have the ability to repair the sheath around your neurons. So some degenerative diseases like Alzheimer's have been shown to be the result of the deterioration of the lining around your neurons. So they're frayed, they haven't been refortified or nourished, right? So lion's mane mushroom goes in there and actually like strengthens these, imagine wires. So there's wires in here,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
But if the outer layer of the wires were to become, broken, those wires are exposed. They're not strong, and they wouldn't make a good connection. I couldn't charge my computer if this was all frayed and withered. So that's what's happening to our brain all the time with a number of different activities, from, negative thought forms, trauma breakdown, our diet, exactly as you were saying, looking at negative media isn't a problem because, oh no, it's just bad content. It's the impact on the brain, because our adrenals and our fight flight response and adrenaline is always triggered in the body, and that is useful. However, it has a very damaging effect when it's over tapped, or when there's too much of it. There's too high a cortisol levels. So what psilocybin is able to help us do is to repair these neural pathways to each other, so that we can connect parts of the brain to other parts of the brain that have maybe never even spoken to each other before. So when we talk about like default mode network and like these kinds of habitual in trainings that the brain is constantly being pushed towards through our behavior, right? Like we have these ways of thinking that are constant and that are set, right? what psilocybin and other plant medicines and even, other mushrooms like lion's mane mushroom, as I was talking about before, is it allows for like a fresh sheet of snow on a ski slope. So say you are a skier and you take your lift and you hit the top of a mountain, and people have been skiing there all day. Imagine these are your neural pathways and the ways that your brain is wired to connect and make decisions.
Mhm.
So some of those have been carved out all day, even maybe weeks at a time without a fresh snowfall. So it's really easy to start on a path that's already been created, right? And it just reinforces the same kind of behaviors and habits. What psilocybin really allegorically allows to happen is a fresh powdering of snow, so that anything is possible. Like, you're not being led down these familiar roads. You actually can pave new roads there. And so this actually allows the brain to fire and perform at levels that are novel, that are new, that are fresh. And that's what I think a lot of people are really actually seeking out in their life, is like this sense of freshness, renewal, and a new way to approach life, because maybe what they've been doing is no longer working. So on a physiological level, psilocybin and its psychedelic component psilocin is shutting down already made systems in the frontal cortex and slowing those down so that we can actually do brain repair and allow neurotransmitters to communicate with each other that never have before. So the brain on psilocybin, even after psilocybin, so these changes can be permanent. And that's why I really like medicine, is that it doesn't just exist within the journey, this change of mind, that physiologically, once you created those bonds and connections, they remain. So you can actually physically alter forever the shape and quality of your consciousness by repairing your brain and bringing back neurotransmitters or neural connections that have been dead. And there's a lot of activities that destroy those things. Drinking alcohol is one of them. So especially for an alcoholic like I was, it is extremely beneficial to rewire our brain in a new way, so that maybe alcoholism is no longer a thing that we have to ski the slope down with.
Wow, that is so profound. I like the way you put that.
It's shared in our community, but I think that's one of the most amazing analogies, because you could picture that, but when you're on psilocybin, you could feel it happening.
Yeah, hell yeah, absolutely. What's the difference between the lion's mane and then, like, because lion's mane is not psychedelic, right?
No, it is a medicinal mushroom, but it's not a hallucinogen.
Okay, so what's the difference there?
So there's lots of different classes of mushrooms out there. And I have another really great homie. His name's Miko James, and he's just like this amazing mycologist. And so he's a studier of mushrooms, and there's lots of different kinds of mushrooms. So there's like poisonous mushrooms, there's culinary mushrooms, there's medicinal mushrooms, and that's, the hallucinogenic mushrooms get kind of lumped into medicinal mushrooms. And what's really interesting about mushrooms is they are a really interesting mix of like animal and plant. So they're not quite plant and they're not quite animal. They're in a completely different class, all their own. And their chemical makeup is what makes each one of them different. They have a ton of amino acids in them. Lion's mane has a ton of amino acids in them that the body really, really needs. So there's some amino acids that are called essential amino acids, which means that your body doesn't make them. So essential is you have to get them from outside and bring them into your body. And what we're really seeing in the world right now is people that are just nutrient deficient. Like, we are watching the breakdown of the human vehicle because we simply are not getting the wide variety of foods that are truly available in our world. Most people these days, they just go to the grocery store and they see the same things on, in the produce section, because that's what people demand. We don't demand rare fruit, and we don't eat seasonally at the grocery store.
Right.
So to maintain tomatoes all year round, they are harvesting tomatoes from all over the world, pulling them, when they're not ripe and shipping them. And, a traditional apple that you would see in the grocery store is at least a year old.
Wow.
So that apple is dead. Like
Mm-hmm.
its nutrients are fucking gone. So what's really cool about mushrooms is that the fruiting bodies of mushrooms only last, X amount of time. When you see the mushroom come up out of the ground, that's actually its death. That's
Oh,
actually
okay.
final form. So it's lived an entire mycelial layer experience at the roots of these trees or within wood or wherever they want to grow in a growing solution of some kind of substrate. And then they fruit and then pew, they die. So you harvest them at like the peak. You have a very tight window. And so that's like its most nutrient dense. And so we're talking like the diseases of the body, whether that's in the mind, that Alzheimer's, degenerative diseases of the brain neurologically can be healed with lion's mane, which looks like a brain, which is incredible because nature has this incredible way of showing you a food that's good for the body part that it's good for by it looking that way, So lion's mane has it, just a ton of vitamins, minerals, nutrients, essential amino acids that you just don't find in other foods. And so our ancient ancestors didn't have a grocery store. They would be
Right.
out foraging. They would be out in the woods. They would be out in the forest. They would be out in their garden, or they would be out, walking around, hunter gatherers, picking up berries, things here and there. And yeah, maybe you could get a level of amino acids from your spinach in a plastic bag at the store. But if you found this one rare berry in the forest, you would get days, weeks worth of the very same amino acid that you maybe needed to eat 5 pounds of spinach for. So what really the truth is like, it's not this great mystery. It's important that we have access to mushrooms as food, because mushrooms are a powerful source of nutrients that we actually can only really harvest them at their peak. You can't
Mm-hmm.
really pluck a mushroom when it's too early. So it is one of the most nutrient dense foods that we can have access to. And in them, they just have incredible healing properties. So, cordyceps mushrooms, reishi, maitake, shiitake, lion's mane. There are so many incredible mushrooms, and psilocybin producing mushrooms is just one of them. Amanita muscaria is also another hallucinogenic mushroom that's not actually quite a psilocybin producing mushroom either. So, knowing that mushroom spores can exist in the vacuum of space is a really interesting idea when we consider what really is an alien, what really is extraterrestrial knowledge and technology. So, if we consider that maybe potentially psilocybin spores or mushroom spores of all kinds have maybe come from the vacuum of space, we can maybe make the claim that potentially psilocybin mushrooms and the other mushrooms are alien, three-dimensional, which you can then access their technology by ingesting.
So when you said that, that reminds me of like DMT, like.
Yeah.
So like people say they talk to other like beings and shit on that. So I'm like, that's immediately what I went to. I'm like, and that's supposed to be a chemical in our own brain, right?
Yes. So there's a part of your brain that produces melatonin, and melatonin, when given the opportunity to, can actually transform into DMT. So we have a lot of melatonin in our brain, and the way that we're able to access and create more melatonin is by being in complete darkness. And so if we're in complete darkness, whether we're sleeping at night or whether we're living in parts of the world where there is not a lot of sunlight and we're able to be in complete darkness, then we can produce incredible amounts of DMT.
Mm.
And so yes, it is a naturally occurring substance. Some people say that it's excreted in really high doses when you're born, when you die, and when you dream. I mean, to be completely frank, I smoked 5-MeO DMT last night, and I get to kind of reflect in that molecule a lot. And there is something very ingenious and important about that molecule. And it's also very present in ayahuasca brew and the acacia tree, which was the Egyptian tree of life. So if you look at the ancient Egyptian civilization or the Kemetic civilization, and you wonder, how did they build all those buildings? And how did they have such a rich understanding about the afterlife? And how did they perform, surgery at that time, or have mummification kind of pinned down? Was their relationship with dimethyltryptamine and also psilocybin mushrooms, which have been proven to have been used at that time.
Wow, I never even thought of that. I'm all about the ancient alien theory and stuff like that, and that I've heard from other places too. That's not mainstream archaeology. That a lot of script has referred to the temples already being there, and they were given to them by the gods. But what you just said put a whole new angle on it, because I didn't even think about that.
Well, you said it yourself, actually. You said, people smoke DMT and they say that they talk to these deities, right?
Right.
So I actually think it lines up really well, because if ancient aliens are talking to these ancient civilizations, how do you think these ancient civilizations got in touch with these aliens?
Absolutely. And I agree 100%. It's like
through the entheogens.
It's another piece of the puzzle that I was like, kind of just clicked right now.
Like, how did they talk to them? Why would they have wanted to talk to them? And I really love, I don't know if you're into like extraterrestrials, but I really love the CE5 kind of protocol, and the whole idea that Stephen Greer is putting forward about, have you heard of CE5, about this whole thing?
I know Stephen Greer, but I'm not too familiar with the CE5. Why don't you go into that?
Yeah. So I love we're getting into aliens right now, because I feel like there's a reason why there's like a huge, massive shift in like pushing for full disclosure for extraterrestrial life, and like the psychedelic movement is happening at the same time. There's a reason for it. So Stephen Greer was putting out and is continuing to put out this protocol for how we can get in touch with extraterrestrial life. And there's kind of this like scale for the kinds of extraterrestrial experiences and contact that people have. So CE means, what the fuck does CE even mean? Close encounters, that's right. So close encounters, right, of the first kind, the second kind, the third, the fourth, and the fifth, which Stephen Greer is putting together. So Stephen Greer is putting together CE5, which is human-led contact with extraterrestrials, because all the other ones are like some person sees a craft, like this craft just like accidentally comes through my path, and like that's CE1, that's close encounters 1, right, all the way up to CE4, which is full-blown abduction, which is like this alien targets some guy in the middle of fucking Midwest and then swoops him up, does some experiments, and brings him back down. So CE5 is human beings meditating and consciously attempting to bring contact to extraterrestrials by increasing their frequency of love and connection to the cosmos, so that they send out a signal that makes these extraterrestrial beings attracted and feel safe enough to come and connect with them. So the CE5 protocols are like going on all over the United States right now. He teaches CE5 to people so that they can get groups together to do it, and to create a harmonic frequency within a group of people, so that they create what's kind of like a light pillar, so that, these extraterrestrials can kind of come through and make themselves be known to them. We're building this bridge. So when we think about what the entheogens and what some of these plant medicines have done for ancient civilizations, is allowed these civilizations to harmonize with a frequency that matched an extraterrestrial race that maybe wanted to come and share knowledge with them. Because our ancient ancestors were prolific. Like, I feel like we've actually been on like a de-evolving path since our ancient ancestors,
Absolutely.
For real. And coming back and harmonizing some of their lessons is like bringing us closer to where they were. And where they were was in contact with not just every other cosmic being on planet Earth, from the plant people to the fungus people to the insects and the animal spirits, and knowing and being in harmonic relationship with every life form on Earth. But also, when the Earth is at a harmonic frequency that way, we can be good cosmic neighbors and send out frequencies of cooperation and peace that allows extraterrestrials to want to come and work with us. So, our ancient ancestors, we have like our Kemetic ancestors. Where is it?
They got the Anubis with the Mayan stuff.
dude, so you got your ancient chem, and then you got your ancient Mayan. That's right. Because
Yeah.
that's the truth. Like they are one, they are one. And what makes them similar is their work with the pyramids, their work with the
Mm.
light grids and the stars, their work with the earth, their work with their knowledge of the seasons and of cycles, their work with mummification in the afterlife, and their relationship with extraterrestrial beings and with entheogens. So it's no surprise that entheogens and extraterrestrial knowledge and information is so deeply tied to each other because they are one and the same. Psilocybin mushrooms are an extraterrestrial technology. So is dimethyltryptamine. So is, any of the other naturally occurring entheogenic molecules like iboga and ibogaine, excuse me. So we're at a time where the more of us come into a frequency with these higher realms of consciousness, the more alien beings will arrive to us. And when I smoke DMT, I'm getting an attunement from a way higher density frequency of space and time, beyond space and time. And Terrence McKenna talks about the machine elves a lot. I don't know if you're familiar with the machine
I've heard
elves.
of them. Yep.
Yeah. So, this is like, I love it. We went from microdosing into like a really deep dive. So sorry, listeners, like you kind of had to, I'm sure your listeners are like used to this, but microdosing is really scratching the surface. But what's really beautiful about microdosing is that you now get to enter a world where this molecule can actually start to shape and change the way you think and allows you to be even open to ideas like this, so that when you are ready to take your deeper dives and you're ready to sit in ceremony and commit your life to expanding your frequency waves and expanding your capacity as a conscious being, then you can also know that your life is part of a way larger system, and that when you get into your harmony and you harmonize your life, physical body, emotional body, spiritual body, that you help the entire system of planet Earth come online to be part of a better galaxy. So it's really wonderful because my life is so small, everything is so big, and I'm like, but if you fucking click into place, it allows everything else to click into place too. So we matter and we don't matter. It's pretty wonderful that ultimately it's our playground that we're in, and we get to make the choice how we
I
want to
had
begin.
I had that saying that you said, we matter but we don't matter. I had a buddy of mine. He's a Buddhist. On my first episode for my show, and he said that a lot. We are everything but we are nothing. So that's what that reminded me of. But
Yeah.
it's so profound to me that you brought up the mechanical elves, because this is what really hit me when I started looking at the DMT trips, and even like the good and the bad people using it for certain contacts. Because just like there's good humans, there's bad humans. Just like there's good aliens, there's bad aliens, stuff like that. These people doing these trips are like, they're and I don't know if this is your experience, but the ones that I read up on, they're contacting the same beings every time, every trip. So that's what was like mind blowing to me. I was like, oh my God, like there's something to that, definitely. And for anybody who's new to the open minds or extraterrestrials or anything like that, I seriously think that if not all of them, some of them are definitely on different wavelengths or frequencies. So you have to tune into that. And there's numerous ways you can tune into that to be able to make contact with them. So I think that's cool that you touched in on that.
Yeah, and I mean, what's a spirit? What's a god? What's an angel?
Mm,
Like what makes an angel different than an extraterrestrial?
right.
What makes the Netaru of ancient Kemet, Isis, Osiris, or Asar and Aset and Ma'at and Anubis? Like, what makes all these beings, you know, terrestrial? Like, it certainly, any major religion has been in some way influenced by the presence of extraterrestrial life, extraordinary densities, frequencies, people coming as light. This is the visitation of higher frequency entities. And a lot of the, even the ayahuasca traditions, when they talk about Madre Ayahuasca and the spirit of ayahuasca, is like, they're drinking a vine and a combination of leaves, to come together into the sacred brew where you can arrive to Madre. And Madre can help you with your life. She is the serpent that kind of is the DNA code that shows you where to unlock and where to purge and how to be and where to grow. And so, I would speculate, that Madre could be an extraterrestrial being that we all access through this combination of molecules. And almost everyone who drinks DMT is visiting Madre Ayahuasca. So the same way that these people are smoking DMT and they're meeting these machine elves and they're, coming to the same beings over and over again is actually substantiated by indigenous tradition systems for thousands of years.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. It really is. There's a history of it. It's not just like something that just happened recently. It's recorded.
Yeah, it's not like some dudes in the 60s are like, holy crap, like we're meeting the same people over and over again. It's like, maybe try a couple thousand years, dude, of like building a relationship with an energy and having many generations of people build relationships with an energy and see what that does to human civilization.
And that's the thing that we've lost. And I'm so glad that you brought up that, what was it, the CE5?
CE5 protocol.
Yeah. So like the hand in hand thing that you just talked about, as far as like the microdosing and then the CE5, it's almost like a spiritual awakening has happened over a lot of people, and more people that I talk to or that I interact with have seemed to have, like, even if just the seeds planted, like they have a thought of like, maybe something's going on here, to like full blown, like here we are, we're all into this stuff. It makes sense on everything else that's going on in the world with, I don't want to get too off subject, but like stuff like the pandemic or like the stuff that they feed to us on the TV. It's like people always bring up, oh, the next world war. And I tell people all the time, like it's already here. It's the war on our conscious. And that's exactly what they're trying to block. So
are you a fan of Graham Hancock's work? Have you listened to that great TED Talk that he put together called The War on Consciousness?
I haven't.
I mean, you said it, The War on Consciousness. It's a really great talk that he's also like a very controversial archaeologist, not quite ancient aliens vibe, but he's talking about advanced civilizations before the Younger Dryas cataclysm, which was like 13,000 years ago, I believe. And he's talking like civilizations that were very advanced here in North America. So this kind of debunks a lot of like mainstream science. And so he put out a talk called The War on Consciousness, and TEDx, who is supposed to be an open minds type of platform, deplatformed him, banned the talk, and deleted it from like their website. And it's like, well, you were just bought by Coca-Cola, so I can kind of understand why you wouldn't want some messaging like this coming out. But like, you're absolutely right. We were just on the line with Decriminalize Nature, which is an amazing organization, an initiative that is helping cities all over the United States and in Canada to start their own decriminalization process on the local level. Because we know if we try to put Decriminalize Nature on a president's desk, it's going to get shooed away. But if we can talk to Congress people, if we can talk to our city mayors and like local level officials, then we can actually change the game like in our cities. And so, Oakland, Santa Cruz, Oregon is completely like legal there. So it's like psilocybin, and it's just actually broken open on the East Coast as well. Like I think 3 Boston cities now are completely decriminalized for entheogens. And we had the presentation from their president, come speak to one of my groups that we put on. And he talked about the same thing, this war on consciousness and surveillance capitalism. And it's really interesting that he charted back, 3,000 years, right? And the first war was on land connected people, the war on people that were connected to the land, because the ultimate goal and the ultimate motivation for those who want to wage war in this way is fear-based wealth accumulation. Some people under the belief that there's not enough for everyone, and somehow I need to secure enough shit for myself for billions of years while everyone else suffers, right? So that consciousness, that separation
from abundance, from truth, from the earth, led the war on land, like land connected people. So like the pagans, the indigenous, people that were earth worshipers, etc., polytheists, so they enact war on those folks, right? And then they enact like a war on melanin, and this is what brings the drug war. And then we have, the war on consciousness is really like kind of the final frontier, is like, how far can we allow fear-based, wealth accumulation driven consciousness to live in our life, to come in and like soak into the way that the free people live. And we've had so much taken away from us over thousands and thousands of years time. I mean, you and I probably have ancestors who were fighting the system since the beginning, and that's why we're here right now. That's why we're having this conversation. That's why you do what you do and I do what I do, because there's something intrinsic within me that knows the system is trying to rob us of sovereignty, And so this final frontier, how are we going to live in our own brain? How are we going to live in our own consciousness? How are we going to have access to what we believe is God and what we believe is our life lived as a conscious being? This is what's at stake. When we see the media and we see everything laid out the way that it is, this is how you're supposed to think, this is what you're supposed to buy, the fact that you need to buy anything at all, this is where you should get your food, this is how you should have sex, this is how you should have children, this is how you should treat those children when you have them. They're all infringements on sovereignty. And so the idea that we can even have plants and fungi that are illegal is an atrocity of humanity, like at its most fundamental level. So what you and I are speaking to as far as this microdosing conversation is really like the beginning of us situating our minds to understand and know that we have sovereignty to be with nature. And I think decriminalize nature is a perfect word for it. There's nothing criminal in nature whatsoever.
I mean, you can't even collect rainwater in some states.
I know, or grow food in your front yard.
Yeah.
Absolutely disgusting, like what we're living in, the Babylon system that like most of us are thriving in somehow. But truthfully, like it's a farce to think that we can somehow escape and like create something, while this Babylon exists. It's like we actually have to go into the center and fucking open it up and change it from the center. And that's the hard work of decolonizing. And that's a work that my ancestors put on me to do. And like, it's going to be my many generations forward that I won't even see it happen in my lifetime, MLK knew he wasn't even going to see it in his lifetime, and yet dedicated and motivated himself to be of service to a cause that maybe 50 generations later would be seeing the benefits of. But I don't believe in death. I don't
either.
We don't die. We just come back, and we travel these underworld realms. And sometimes, the earth calls us back because she knows that like she needs our help and that we need her at a time. So it's no surprise to me that you're here now at this pivotal moment, and that I'm here now at this pivotal moment, because we have a lot at stake right now. And the more minds we open and the more sovereignty we allow people to really feel, and the more joy we allow people and welcome people to walk into and know that trauma is not your story and that joy and abundance is yours. And that's what this medicine can teach you, that we can actually change the world. And that's why, these plant medicines are opening up in a big way at this time, because we need them now more than ever.
See, my parents and my aunts and uncles and all that stuff, they come from the hippie generation. So it trips me out, because like back in like 2008 to like 2012, when I was like first getting into conspiracies, and I would get in arguments with them, and I couldn't understand. I'm like, dude, you guys literally came from a generation where like you were all about the like peace and love and fuck the government and this and that. And then to like see them now, it's just like, wow, that's how easily you can have it taken away or brought on. You know, it works both ways, but it just trips me out to see that, because I feel like the time that we're in right now is like a modern day hippie movement.
Yeah, some people definitely say like this is the, psychedelic revolution, the second wave of it. And really the evolutionary path that people were on, it it wasn't a complete evolution, it was an evolution that kind of came and went. And for a lot of that time, like the pendulum kind of swung in the other direction shortly after, like there was this big opening and then there was like an equivalent contracting. And it's really interesting that this is the in breath and out breath of every generation, is like, maybe all the hippies now don't really understand our revolution right now or our evolution right now. And it's really interesting because it's like all the things that led to their assertions about the world, is what led them to do what they're doing. And it's a different fight at a different time for people that kind of don't look the same as them, even like, or don't have the same structures in place. They didn't have telephones and cell phones and access to media 24/7. They really actually were like living what was in the news and what was in the newspaper. So it's really interesting that like, I love the hippie revolution, but it's extremely problematic as a movement.
Well, and it was a crude time, but I feel like you touched on it. It was like planting the seed. Like it's almost like you kind of needed that to evolve into the next step or be ready for the next phase. Because I also think, like you said, it was a pendulum that swung in the wrong way. I think that was by intelligent design. I feel like the juggernauts that we're up against saw it and were like, wait a minute. We're going to put a stop to this, kind of like they are now.
Totally.
It's when you see the spiritual awakening, they're aware, they know what's going on because they've been suppressing this history for millennia. You know what I mean? So they see it and they catch wind of it and they'll try to throw everything they can at us. And that's why I think, again, it's important for people like you. Maybe we will see it in our lifetime. I hope we do, because we both got kids. But if we don't, at least we know that we did the work to continue that on somewhere with somebody.
Absolutely. And, it's what's really cool about this time, and what's also really scary about this time, is like so much of our bandwidth is expanded to hear of stories that are happening all the way on the other side of the planet. Like we are becoming increasingly aware of issues happening globally at an immediate rate, and it's very, very hard to discern exactly, how to help, and I've been kind of getting tuned into this idea around the Bodhisattva Path, right? We have the Buddha and then we have the Bodhisattva. And the Buddha is, we got the meditator on the mountain, right? Reaching enlightenment through perceptibly teaching in isolation and connecting directly with the divine. And some of us are meant to do something a little bit different. The Bodhisattva Path sometimes instructs us to be in action, and to do that by listening, to what's going on around us. There's not a lot that we can do about what's going on the other side of the world. And we could get so much more spiritual enlightenment by just serving our community locally, by having the podcast, by taking care of our sick grandparent, and express a spiritual life through service, through heart-centered service that sometimes this medicine calls us to do. Like, that's what I kind of am starting to understand about, why so many of us become teachers. It's an old African proverb that says, each one teach one. And once you learn and once you pick up the piece of knowledge, that is actually our responsibility to go out and share it, right? Because that's actually what disrupts the wealth driven fear-based accumulation system, is that fear-based accumulation. Oh, well, if they know what I know, then I won't have power anymore. You know what I mean? And it's interesting because you did mention about, the puppeteers and the people who are running like shadow government type of shit. Like,
they're doing magic just like we are. You know, I forget who says it, but someone said, if you want to make $1 million, get like a financial advisor. But if you want to make $1 billion, get an astrologer, right? Because there is this understanding of cosmic energy that underpins all power dynamics. And the folks that are at these higher seats of power that have crawled their way up there have a deep and profound knowledge of the esoteric. And so many of us have power within us that is completely untapped. And to consolidate and centralize power, like consolidating and centralizing money, economy, you know, it pulls the power from the many and funnels it into the hands of the very few. And that's like what we've been living in for generation after generation, is just the consolidation of wealth, knowledge, property, land, resources to the very, very few. So what really disrupts that process is by sharing resources among ourselves, you know, the way that mycelial networks do under the ground. I mean, mushrooms in their mycelial phase are the internet of trees. They share resources without borders or boundaries. Like, it's immediate knowledge exchange at an exponential rate. And that's actually the true circuitry of planet Earth. So, you know, when we do that with each other, when we have this Bodhisattva type principle within us that is like, I'm here to spread knowledge, I'm here to like open up my mycelial web and share knowledge, resources, information, boundaryless, you know, we kind of break apart this consolidation of power kind of energy, and we allow each other and our neighbors to thrive. And mushrooms are the ultimate teacher of that. When you eat mushrooms enough, you kind of become like them, and they teach you how to be like them. And that's ultimately what's healing people, is what made us the symbolic, hyper intelligent Homo sapien into who we are now, you know, is actually our interaction with these entheogens. So if we come back to them, we could potentially alter our consciousness to be able to supersede these problems and think through them and think into them and live into them to their completion. Like, I just pray for the slow and peaceful death of this 3,000-year paradigm that's attempted to take power away from people and consolidate it into the hands of a very few, very afraid, very disconnected human beings. But truthfully, it's a war on people by people. And that's very sad to know that there are people that are suffering that bad, that they're willing to hijack an entire planet to make themselves feel comfortable. That's a truly disconnected person.
Yeah, it is. I agree. Is there a bad side to microdosing, like, you know, side effects or did you kind of touch on that with bad trips and stuff like that?
I mean, like, the only thing that I've noticed with microdosing, or even just taking any dose of psilocybin, is like sometimes the dose isn't a good match. So some people say with microdosing, like, oh, I'm getting a headache, or I'm feeling very agitated, or like I feel frustrated. I'm like, you're just having too much. You know, you don't have to have a giant dose like to get what you need. So with microdosing, don't be afraid to start small, and don't be afraid to half your dose. And if you're feeling like, okay, I'd like to go a little bit deeper, double your dose. Like, that's what's really cool about microdosing, or just having a relationship with psilocybin, is that it's up to you how you sit and how you develop a protocol for yourself. You know, there's the James Fadiman protocol that, you know, asks us to do 1 day on, 2 days off. It's the most well-studied protocol out there. And yet maybe taking 2 days a row, like, is what works for people the most. And maybe taking 0.25 might be too much. For me, 0.25 on a regular day is way too fucking much.
Yeah.
So bad experience or like negative side effects of microdosing, if you accidentally have too much and you have not such a microdose day, that's usually the worst of it.
Do you think that, like, being in the right state of mind when you're doing it, whether it's macrodose or microdosing, has a lot to do with it. Like as far as like, say, taking it at work or like around the wrong people, or do you think that there's something to that? Or
My son's gonna come. Come here, baby.
what's up, buddy?
Make sure you got your
Hi. What's your name?
This is Martin.
Hi, Martin. Nice to meet you.
He's gonna be 2 at the end of November.
Ooh, big boy, huh?
Woke up from a nap.
Right on. He's cute.
Yeah, he's got a big mess of hair. Want let you? Okay. So, and you're absolutely right. How you, and we kind of talked about this before, was like how you approach your experience has a lot to do with what you get out of it. More than just the intention, even like the physiology of your own body can also really change how you experience psilocybin. So if you're extremely underslept, like you could push your body into exhaustion and have like maybe an experience that is not comfortable, you know? Also, the kinds of foods that you eat can also have a big impact on the way that you feel certain kinds of medicines as well. So there's some medicines that bring up an amino acid that is counterproductive to psilocybin's actions. So you would want to stay away from certain foods, certain activities leading up to a bigger dose. With microdosing, I always just recommend like eat a light meal, but never come on a super full stomach, because psilocybin can, here's the thing. If you eat a capsule, right, and it has to go through your digestive tract, right, that's a long process to get down to your digestive tract, because then your body has to absorb psilocybin and then process it through your blood. And so it's the psilocybin that gets to your blood and into your brain that you then feel the impacts of. So you can lengthen the time that's needed and dilute the process if you have a stomach full of food. One really ingenious way to take a microdose of psilocybin is to actually just let it dissolve right into your mouth, because the psilocybin will then enter your bloodstream directly from your mouth and get into your brain extremely quickly, as opposed to just swallow this, guzzle a bunch of water, and then wait 2 hours for an effect.
Do you have like a list of foods that people should stay away from off the top of your head, or like some main ones?
Yeah. So the amino acid, theanine, let me see it. Theanine foods. So theanine food sources. We want to lower, is it theanine? Let me see, theanine diet.
I want to write these down for future reference.
So what we're going to want to do is we're just going to want to stay from dairy.
Okay.
We're going to want to stay from red meat. We're going to want to stay from caffeine. We're going to want to stay away from the other ones in that list. Like tofu, soy products, things like that. And mostly it's that you're so great with it. And mostly it's what people would call a dieta.
What is that?
So a dieta is a process of clearing the body of certain foods and focusing certain nutrients in the body to prepare yourself for an experience.
Yeah, that's definitely interesting to me, all those things that you just named off. Is there a difference between the spirit and the soul, you think?
That's a really interesting question. And yeah, a lot of people would say that there's a difference between the spirit and the soul. And for me, I don't over-complexify. I don't always like to over-complexify. For me, soul is SOL, right? It's the light within you. It's the generating force that animates you. It also is, right, SOUL, soul, is also SOL, soul, is also SOIL, soil. So it's the intelligent makeup of what animates life. And spirit is to inspire, to respirate. So it's like the breath of life. It's almost like a bit more mercurial to me. So in essence, like, it is a bit different, but I think it comes from the similar source, and there maybe are differentiations of the energy, but soul is what perhaps is the consciousness that lives within the heart, whereas spirit is the consciousness that lives within the brain.
What's up, buddy? Do you think meditation is important with microdosing? Because I know you talked about rituals with doing this. Can you kind of like go over or explain like what a ritual would involve?
Yeah. So you mentioned meditation, and I think meditation is very, very important because the meditation is the entrainment of the mind, right? It's to learn how to focus the brain, right? It's not to like stop thoughts from happening. I think that's where a lot of people fail in meditation, is like, stop thinking, stop thinking, stop thinking. Stop thinking thoughts. And that certainly does not work. That's not meditation, as you know. Hi, baby. So meditation is allowing thoughts to kind of come through, notice them, be the noticer of thoughts, not the thinker of thoughts, but the watcher of thoughts, and we can be selective about what thoughts we want to feed, right? We can be selective about that process, and also be selective about like how we're feeding actions, how we're feeding beliefs. So with microdosing, meditation flow states can actually be a little bit more available to you because you've kind of like allowed your brain to shut down the prefrontal cortex, which like forces you to sometimes categorize everything that you see. It helps you enter what some people will call the child's mind or the child brain, or allows that monkey mind to kind of shut down so you can enter a state of deep meditation with psilocybin. However, any meaningful activity when paired with microdosing will inflate the benefits of the activity. So here's an example. If you do Tai Chi and you do Tai Chi often, you are already entraining your brain to heal in the way that Tai Chi has been laid out, right? If you add psilocybin to that process, you now have allowed your brain to come in a way more in a state that's fresh, right? In a state that's malleable. So it increases your neuroplasticity. So if you do Tai Chi on psilocybin, then you are enhancing the benefits of Tai Chi because you've opened up your neuroplasticity. So say you're a painter, you're a musician, right? And you do those activities on psilocybin. Psilocybin allows the benefit of that activity to magnify. So that's why a lot of people right now are doing a lot of like problem solving microdosing, or these guys in Silicon Valley are like going through their, their problems and their problem solving with psilocybin, because psilocybin allows us to think extremely differently by sheer nature of opening up different neurotransmitters. So even applying microdosing to math, applying it to the sciences, applying it to the arts, applying it to meditation and spiritual practices is proving to be very beneficial. With a ritual, for example, ritual looks very different for different people, but a lot of people like to work with their ancestors, for example. Building an ancestral altar while you're on psilocybin, or trying to make contact with a dead loved one while you're on psilocybin, is something that a lot of people are starting to do these days, is because they're starting to realize that that mind that's telling you, no, this isn't working, this can't be happening, needs to shut down sometimes. And psilocybin has the ability for us to be able to shut that brain down and just get into the meat of the action, which is, I need to get in contact with my ancestor. And you can open your mind to the possibility that that is what's happening instead of having a brain that's constantly chattering and saying what you're doing is stupid and you should stop. So what we're looking to shut down is a mind that is constantly criticizing life, living, and to return to what it was like to be a child. And the brain of a child in 6 months time is very similar to a brain on psilocybin.
Really?
Mm-hmm. The pictures of like MRI scans of a 6-month-old is very similar to a brain on psilocybin.
Well, I just learned another thing new right there.
Mm-hmm. So we can return to that, and that brain tells us that anything is possible.
Mm-hmm.
So is doing a ritual to contact your dead loved one is like a very realistic thing to do.
Right.
Yeah.
So do you do like a lot of groundwork, like grounding, like barefoot outside and connecting with nature when you're doing stuff like that?
So my fiance, who's Martin's dad, he wears shoes in the house, and I was like talking to him one day, and I was like, I don't understand why you wear shoes in the house. And he's like, I don't understand why you don't wear shoes outside. So that's just like an understanding of who I am. But, yes, I'm constantly barefoot, and have, like a nice yard in the back, and try to make relationships with the soil and let the soil know who I am. How does the soil know who you are? How do you share your DNA with the land that you're living on if you never share yourself with it? And I have a lot of friends that are cultivators and farmers, and grounding for me looks like sometimes, introducing my DNA to the physical land that I'm on. So our indigenous ancestors had relationships with the soil, with the trees, with the plants, because they related so personally with all living things. So, some people say, oh, like, how can you even talk about like ancient Maya or the Aztecs when they like did human sacrifice and stuff? And I'm like, because not all sacrifice is done in a dark way. When I went to Chichen Itza and I was learning about, how they celebrated the spring equinox and the solstices, they would, have a ball game, and whoever won would be sacrificed. The captain of the winning team would be sacrificed, because it was a high honor to do so. But what does giving blood to the soil do? It enriches the soil. There are nutrients in our body. There's calcium, there's phosphorus, there's nitrogen, there's protein and all these other micronutrients inside, carbon in our body that the earth needs to replenish itself. So when we bury people in caskets, like separated from all of life, like we actually don't nourish the soil with our genetics and with what's physically connected to our body. So when I ground, I bleed on the land. Like when I have my moon time, I offer it back, or I spit, or I leave hair, and I like let the earth know I'm here and I live here, and this is what my needs are. When I, like I said, I have cultivator friends that cultivate cannabis, for example, or tobacco. They lick the seeds, they put the seeds in their mouth, and then they plant it, because now the seeds have our DNA and they can grow food that matches what we need physiologically. Same thing with my son. Huge. Yeah, it is. It's profound. Like our connection to the land, that grounding process of letting the land know who we are actually just benefits us, and it benefits the land. We create a reciprocal relationship with the land. So Martin, for example, he's a breastfed baby. So his saliva communicates with the skin glands in my body what nutritionally he needs. So my breast milk changes as he grows, because his saliva is communicating to me what nutrients are lacking in his diet, so that my body can produce and channel that into my milk and then give him exactly what he needs, like a feedback loop.
Wow.
So that's grounding, like 101 is like anchoring in to the land that you're doing medicine on. So anytime someone's like, I want to microdose, I want to do a ritual, I want to contact these ancestors, I want to heal my womb, I'm like, what's your relationship with your yard? What's your relationship with your land that you live on? Does it know you're trying to heal? Does it know like what magnetism it needs to create in order for you to create a healing portal around you? Are you paying homage to your land? Are you visiting your trees in your neighborhood and like giving water and talking to them? Because if not, we can't even heal on that land.
Do you think that I've read some articles that our DNA is like the little bit that we do understand and we have research is like not from this planet? Do you agree that we're not from here either, or like our ancestors aren't from here?
Well, if the mushrooms aren't from here either, I'm totally okay with that idea.
Right.
I don't think there's anything like wrong. Maybe some of us are from here, maybe some of us are not, you know. We are having an earthbound experience at this time right now, and so that's a gift. But to say that I maybe had consciousness or life on another planet, or that, you know, the Elohim saw the daughters of man and took a liking to them and like made human hybrids and all that Book of Enoch shit, like, I mean, I'm here for it, but it's just really interesting, the timeline on that, because they said that the timeline, the split in the DNA, like happened in Europe like 30,000 years ago or something. I forget exactly what the timeline is on that whole implantation of like human consciousness with DNA. But who's to say that that DNA isn't coming from entheogens, you know, a relationship with that like alien consciousness, as it helped us develop a DNA code that might not be super terrestrial. So I hate to say like anything is possible, but I've read into this a little bit, and I'm just really skeptical of the idea that the human beings that you and I are, that we were bred to be slaves on the planet to harvest gold for an alien race. Like, I just, Zachariah Sitchin, I'm like, were you really understanding what the fuck you were reading? Or were you like superimposing what you really wanted to believe on these tablets right now? Because like, it's one dude's translation. And I'm like, are you even like a credible source, bro? Like, I don't know. So I'm a little skeptical about Zachariah Sitchins's interpretation of, you know, these tablets. And I'd like to say the sovereignty in me knows that I wasn't born a slave, period.
And, you know, maybe there was a period in time when some races were here and did that. Who knows? But it's just like you said, it's like you can't really remember 30,000 years, 50,000 years. But another thing to touch on too is like all this information that we get, if it's not passed down from generation to generation, it's written in textbooks and that's told to us. So who knows? You know what I mean? Right. Exactly. You kind of just have to go with your instinct on that. And like, you know, you're in touch with your ancestors and stuff. And I feel like that's a more natural and organic approach to it. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And I mean, our ancient Egyptian ancestors, for real, they had deities that were humanoid mixed with like a chimera. So Anubis has the body of a man, but the head of a jackal, you know, and like, so we have within our history, our story of our ancestors, that there is no real limitation on the expression of life on Earth or even in all other realms of the cosmos. So alien DNA is not a scary thing, the same way that like DNA from, you know, a fungus like mixing with other fungus life is not a scary thing as well. It's just like life has no limitation on its expression. And so I think this division of good and bad and they're evil and like we're not evil, and you know that this is a human and this is an animal, like it's this division is really what the problem is. You know, if you read any textbook, it's like this was the winner and this was the loser, and like this is our, not their story. And I'm like, there's many stories, there's one incident, and there's billions of perspectives on it. So I really enjoy conversations like this because it's really cool meeting where other people's minds are at and getting like this on what indoctrination led me to my beliefs and what indoctrinations led you to your beliefs, and maybe we can break through some of those things that separate us and find some common ground.
Yeah, that's huge. And not only that, it's like people always talk about like leveling up and this and that. And I think a lot of people miss, like, you look at social media and certain people that are successful or not successful, whether it's true or not, that's neither
Right.
here nor there. But even the top dog needs a pep talk or to be grounded or brought back sometimes to be, told like, hey man, let me put this into perspective for you, or let me do this. So
Mhm.
I feel like that connectivity, it allows everybody to help each other, because you can get so high, but ultimately you're going to have your downs and your lows and your bad times. You're going to need help from somebody.
Absolutely. Tides certainly shift and seasons change, and no one's an island. No one's this like individual. And I mean, those same exact people who got to the top, that's the one single fruiting body of a giant mycelial network underneath them. They're just the figurehead of a larger systemic process. Like, I didn't get where I'm at without the help of thousands and thousands of people. I would never be where I'm at without a rich community fucking rooting me on. So this is the fabric of what it is to be human. This is what it is to be a mammal. It's like, he wouldn't even be alive if it wasn't for me, and I wouldn't be alive without my mom. Like, so I mean, of course the people at the top need a pep talk, because they would be nothing without somebody.
Right. So what I know we talked about, you run a business, right? Why don't you go into that? Like, what exactly is it that you
Yes.
do?
So there's quite a few things that I do. So I'm a full-time course. I have lots of help though, thank goodness. I run two businesses, one of which is an herbal smoke blend business. We also do botanical supplements. So the herbal smoke blend business is called Goddess Breath, and Goddess Breath is really situated in returning to the sacred ritual of smoking, and smoking plants, and not just cannabis, but all kinds of plants. A lot of plants have medicinal value when smoked. For example, mullein is a really reparative on the lung tissue within. So if you were to drink mullein and have it go through your bloodstream, it actually would not come in contact with the very tissues it benefits. So smoking mullein is the most effective way to heal your lung tissue with mullein, because it actually needs to touch in to the lung tissue. So we're big proponents of smoking flowers, smoking weeds, smoking plants, and also doing food-based vegan whole food supplement blends. So we're coming out with a really wonderful cacao mix. So I'm very excited for that. It's going to be helpful for like libido, fertility. It's basically a cacao mix for adults. But we also have 4 other botanical powder blends that help with a variety of other issues. And that's a women-run business. All my businesses are led by women and run by women, and it's wonderful.
I got 2 daughters, so that's motivation.
Yes, yeah, it's been 4 years now, and very profitable and happy, and we ship all over the United States and in Canada. So if anyone is looking to heal their relationship with cannabis or tobacco, and they're looking for like a very nourishing, satisfying smoke blend that they can then cut their tobacco with or cut their cannabis with and slowly wean off, or just, add more benefits to their cannabis, I love just smoking J's with a little bit of the blends. We have a grounding blend. We talked about grounding today, and the grounding blend, my girlfriend hit me up and was like, I was just visiting my friend in chemotherapy, and he had a jar of grounding blend next to his bed. And I was like, that's crazy. And the man who had cancer was saying that it's his favorite blend to smoke with the CBD while he's going through chemotherapy. So I was like, fuck, like it's making an impact in my local community. I'm based here in San Diego, occupied Kumeyaay territory. So it's a real honor, and it's a blessing to be able to
bring these blends to our community. They're also formulated to be sipped as tea. So if you're not a smoker, they make great tea. And then the other business that I have is called Mystic Jasper. So Mystic Jasper is like me as an individual operating in the things that I really care about. So I do womb healing work that comes in the way of education. So I don't know, maybe you saw my Instagram, but I do a lot of talk about, you know, giving your blood back to the land. So I teach women how to do that properly. Yoni steaming is also really important to me. And I've been kind of combining microdosing and psilocybin with yoni steaming. So I actually take women on journeys and we do yoni steam and womb healing together while they're in the mush womb consciousness. So
mushroom, I like that.
Dude, it's lit. Like, and what's really interesting about psilocybin mushrooms is it's a serotonin adjutant. So it basically tells our body that we have more serotonin coming into our system that we really do. It almost tricks our body into thinking there's more serotonin available. So serotonin is a regulator for hormones. So when you have a hormone regulator, then you can actually help manage PMS symptoms, issues of the womb, and regulating your cycle. So it's actually especially helpful for people who cycle with with that kind of chemistry. That's why psilocybin is so helpful, is that like it really welcomes serotonin into the body, and serotonin has a very healing impact without frying your system like MDMA can. So that's why taking mushrooms and working with your womb and also working and growing children is very beneficial. Like I took psilocybin my entire pregnancy. And
there you go.
Very beneficial for Martin's growth and well-being. It's a very healthy, smart little man. And so I also help coach women and be there for women that need a lot of support with having an entheogen guided pregnancy too. So those are just, two of the things that I do. So the first one is goddessbreathblends.com. And the second one is mysticjasper.com.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, buddy. Yeah, I think it's important for my listeners and anybody out there tuning in for the first time too. Like, most drugs and illegal drugs are natural in certain forms. And they are medicines, and when taken properly, they're very beneficial. Most drugs, even wine and hops and stuff like that, they're all plants.
Even LSD is a plant derivative.
Right. Ayahuasca, peyote, all that stuff. Yeah. So I think that's very important to touch on. There's a movement of abuse versus like medicinal and properly taking plants, which have, like you touched on and we talked about tonight, have been used for millennia with natives and ancient people to help and benefit us.
Smoking, I feel like that's what really okay, buddy, I got you. I actually think that's really what's been really beautiful about the Goddess Breath project is like people are like, well, isn't smoking bad? And I'm like, intention is everything. Yeah, if you're smoking a pack a day and you're just like worried and you're sending smoke signals of like, oh, I'm so stressed, I have so much anxiety, I need this, I'm pissed off, like I can't believe they did that. I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what you'll get, because tobacco is an initiator of energy. Our indigenous teachers and the people of North American plains that grow tobacco and have a loving relationship with tobacco knows that tobacco is what opens every ceremony, and that's what you give to the East. And the East is the land of beginnings, and it's a direct communication with the divine. Whatever it is that you take in into your lungs and breathe out is a communication with the divine spirit and source consciousness and great creator. So if you're sending tobacco out with the feeling of stress, anxiety, I need this, I hate my circumstances, that's literally all you will get. And so when we smoke in ritual and in prayer and we say, wow, I'm so grateful for this sacred medicine and this tobacco for being a profound teacher for me, that's what you get. So bringing back and calling back plants in every form and our ancient and indigenous relationships to them. Even tobacco got colonized. Do you know what I mean? It got turned into these disgusting cancer sticks that are now killing people, when in itself tobacco is an amazing medicine.
Right. They figured out a way to capitalize on it and make it $1 billion industry.
Truthfully, the path of colonization is to demonize people for specific practices, to separate the people from those practices, to appropriate those practices, and then sell it back to them. So that's what we have today. We have Johns Hopkins University and all these fucking big corporations trying to sell psilocybin molecule to people and make tons of money on it, when they will let the police bust down the door of anyone like me who's cultivating mushrooms in their own home. So, I mean, look at what happened with cannabis. Truthfully, we do not want what happened to cannabis to happen to the entheogens. And so that's why decriminalization over legalization any goddamn day.
Yeah, because California is a prime example of that, just the corporate takeover. And exactly like you said, it's like taking our natural shit and giving it back to us as a toxin. So,
and to sell it back to us at a really high premium when we could have just grown our own medicine ourselves.
Yep. That's why collecting rainwater is illegal.
I know. I just want to say thank you for this amazing and enriching conversation. I feel like maybe Martin's ready for my full attention.
Absolutely.
So, were there any other questions that you feel like we need to touch on for your listeners before we go?
Now, I was about to wrap it up the same thing. So I appreciate your time. I think, Mikaela, I think the work you're doing is great. Martin, it was nice to meet you, buddy.
Hey, Martin, you want to say bye-bye to your uncle?
Say bye-bye. I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. I cannot wait for this episode to come out. Peace to you.
Yeah, my buddy, he makes like little clips and stuff too. So I'll send that all over to you when it's done. You can promote it.
That, man. Thank you so much for the opportunity. It is such a gift, and I cannot wait for this platform. I cannot wait for this platform to grow more. So if there's anything I can do to help, I'm here for you.
Right on. I appreciate it. Well, you have a good evening, and I'll talk to you later.
Likewise. Take care, Rob.
All right. Bye. Peace.